Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Q&A on a documentary by a young filmmaker, a young South African filmmaker, a documentary called I'm Still in Love with Kwaito. My name is Lebona Mayema, and I think I'd like to start by congratulating the organizers of Encounters for launching this virtual edition of the festival, and to then welcome my man, the man of the moment, the director, Master Enzo. Welcome to this Q&A set.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me.
No, I think it is definitely a pleasure, my brother. And I'm going to really just kick in, my brother, into the Q&A and ask you a direct question, right? And say, my man, this is not your first documentary, yeah? So no. I'm going to ask you to tell us about you and your history in documentary filmmaking. You are the CEO of the streets, brother. Tell us who is Enzo Slageys, man.
Enzo Slageys is a young guy from Diepkloof, Soweto, you know, and I've been an active member within the arts and culture space, I think from about the year 2002, you know, and I've basically been involved with music, event organizing, and then I got into the film space in 2008 when I produced my first film for an event I used to organize called Slageys. Yeah. You know, and basically while organizing this event, I was fascinated by how people would document us doing our thing on stage and hosting the event, you know, and it would always be a challenge to get the footage from those guys who had access to the cameras and stuff, until I started tracking them down. And then when I realized how valuable documenting is, then it clicked that, oh, actually, you can start documenting your own stories or documenting other people's stories. And yeah, after 2008, I released my next film in 2010, which was titled Where is the Beef? You know, and then after that, obviously, learning curves there in the, you know, maneuvering the industry, you know, learning more about filmmaking. And then I eventually started my own company in 2014 called Where is the Beef Media, where I felt that, okay, I've done, you know, I've paid my dues, as they say. You know, I think now I can really take on filmmaking on like another level. And yeah, man, you know, since 2014, we've done some amazing films. We did, you know, The Ladies First, where we showcased South African females in South African hip hop. You know, we've done the What's Beef. We've done, we recently released the Dankie San Kasi Rap Bible, you know, a tribute documentary to the late, great, you know what I mean? We've got another film that's gonna be coming out on SABC1 soon called Certified Classics, where we'll be paying, you know, respects to the likes of Jabba, the Proverbs, the Ammunitions, you know, all the OGs. And yeah, man, and today we're launching, you know, the I'm Still in Love with Kwaito documentary. So I'm very excited to be in this space.
I think you would say this is your 6th or 7th endeavor into this space of telling the story of the streets. Yeah, and I want to ask a direct question, my brother, specifically about this film. Yes, and it's about the title, right? You called it I'm Still in Love with Kwaito. Yes, a lot goes into choosing a title for a film. So yes, I'd like you to tell us why you specifically chose this title, and if you think that it achieved what it was intended to do, you know, before we get to whether the film itself or not achieved what it was intended to do. Let's just maybe just talk about the title. You've titled all of your other projects different things. This particular one, why did you call it I'm Still in Love with Kwaito, and do you think it worked?
The reason behind the title is because, you know, as I said, got into the arts and culture space around the early 2000s, and I've been an active member in the hip hop community for about almost 20 years now, you know, and within you know, being an active member in hip hop, you know, there was this thing that was encouraged in hip hop, which was looking down on Kwaito, you know, because in a way, Kwaito has always been compared to hip hop. You know, Kwaito's been called South African hip hop. And when we started, you know, doing this hip hop thing, and the Kwaito guys were the biggest genre in South Africa, there was this, you know, animosity towards Kwaito, right? But as a kid who grew up Soweto, I mean, I was exposed to Kwaito before I was even exposed to hip hop. You know, so I couldn't understand really where this animosity stemmed from. And I would always get into debates with my fellow hip hop brothers, like, but why don't we like Kwaito this much? You know, and they'd be like, no, but Kwaito is not saying anything. They're just repeating the same lines. And I would say because of peer pressure, I ended up also buying into that narrative that Kwaito is dumb, Kwaito is for, you know, slow learners and all that stuff. Until I think recently, you know, as a young adult, I started looking at Kwaito and realizing that actually these people were creating something that was strictly original and authentic to South Africa. You can go anywhere in the world, it's strictly unique to us. Yeah. Right. And then I started going back into my childhood and I was like, actually, you are a Kwaito head, you know what I mean? Before you are a hip hop head, right? And to be honest, I went through so much emotional, you know, introspection as well. That, you know what, Enzo, why are we looking down on this genre? You know, why don't we take it and embrace it? And the funny thing is, on my journey.
Enzo, wait, brother. You see, when you're saying we, right? I'm gonna stop you and ask you there, right? You're speaking about different perspective of people that are taking analytical approaches on Kwaito, different generations, right? If you are able to just quickly contextualize it from that perspective, and I'm asking you this because I am Kwaito. I live Kwaito. You know, I breathe Kwaito, right? Yes. And I'd like you to maybe just give that perspective of you are looking at Kwaito from this particular perspective. So who is this we that you are representing in I Still Love Kwaito?
The we that I'm representing in I Still Love Kwaito is the young people of South Africa, right? That we need to realize that we
need the post-Kwaito generation that Yes.
So, and I wouldn't necessarily call it the post-Kwaito generation as well, because they are Kwaito. You know what I mean? And I've also looked at Kwaito as a metaphor for being South African.
Yes, sir.
You know what I mean? So when I say I'm still in love with Kwaito, I'm basically saying I'm still in love with being Black. I'm still in love with being myself. And that's why even when we started this conversation and we're greeting each other,
yes.
So keeping it authentic, keeping it real, being you, and you know what I mean, and feeling like you don't have to compromise or you don't have to compromise or change leina la gago or wena o mang o Kwaito lebitso la gago ke lebone o Kwaito.
I think I'd like to congratulate you for taking the initiative to, you know, continue telling these stories in this space. There's a huge narrative that needs to be told, and it's a narrative that actually needs to be controlled by the people that actually live and lived this culture, lived on the streets. You are part of, I think, a generation of filmmakers. If you think of the people that were telling the history of the 50s, right? From the stories of Sophia Town, and then the protest music of the 70s and 80s, people going to exile. I think the story of Kwaito is still to be really told, and you have begun making great strides towards telling that story. So I'd like to really congratulate you on that. And I think that in terms of what the title says, I think that it does deliver on the promise of what you get into the story. To be able to just take you to another part of the question, my brother, is to say, some people choose to make documentaries for different reasons, right? And I think in the discussion that we've had, you've explained very clearly and very well why you made this documentary. But another part of the same question, that storytellers use different ways to tell their stories. You chose to include yourself in the story, not only in the voice of a narrator, but also as part of the story. Why did you particularly choose that particular style of documentary filmmaking? Was there a particular reason why you went that way?
I think the main reason why I wanted to be the main character of the story is also because of the position that I hold within the hip hop space, right? Mm-hmm. So the very same space that was celebrating when the media was spreading the propaganda that Kwaito's dead, I was part of that space. And here I am coming back and saying, guys, no, we've been wrong all along, right? This thing is us. This thing, we can't escape it. You know what I mean? And we need to go back and look maybe where we have gone wrong. And that's why I even included, you know, a guy like Questa. In the film. Yes, you know, who also echoes the same sentiments as me by saying, yes, I might be within this space, but hey, I am Kwaito, because this thing, you know what I mean? Yes. So I can't escape it.
In terms of style, what were you referencing? What were you trying to create? Is this the kind of, like, is this Enzo style of documentary filmmaking? Because I think there's a culture, you know, and everyone starts off at a particular point. You grow and learn different techniques of storytelling, and there's specific elements that make great filmmakers, documentary filmmakers, that follow this style of immersing themselves in the story. So I'm trying to get an understanding of what was your intention in immersing yourself in that story, and I think you've answered partly sufficiently part of that question, sir.
Yes, sir. So I think it's the first documentary that I've done like this, you know?
Okay, yes.
Now, usually I'm the guy who's behind the scenes, you know, making sure everything is fine. And then I would have like a piece of paper with questions and I ask the questions.
Yes,
right?
But this time you chose to put yourself into the documentary yourself.
Yes, yes. So this time
I think interesting technique, and if when done extremely well, it's a very effective way of creating documentaries. So I'm just saying, there's an opportunity to grow in that space, and we need the storytellers, like being the ones that tell the story. So big up on that particular one. To just ask another specific question. You use a lot of music in the documentary, Enzo, right?
Yes,
and
sir.
In fact, there's music from the beginning to the end, including even on top of the interviews, the people that are being interviewed. But there's actually, and this is where, like I said, I'm Kwaito, my brother, so my playlist is from Tempi Pusha, saying from all the way to now. So when I watch a Kwaito documentary and I don't see a single hit or hear a single hit, but I hear underlying music, I begin to ask, what happened to the Kwaito big hit? So can you just share some insights on how you use music in the documentary, but in particular, how you navigated the challenges around music copyright and access to the copyright? Because the truth is that it glares in your documentary, and I'd like you to share your story.
All right, cool. So what I did is I went to a musician called Cyber Beats, right? He's a young beat maker from Sasolburg. And I basically told him that I'm working on a film and it's called I'm Still in Love with Kwaito. And if he can, he must create some music that is Kwaito, right? And this is a guy who creates hip hop beats. And what he sent me, I was so amazed. And I was like, wow, no, man, this actually also goes to show that this genre can be created in 2020 and sound very authentically Kwaito, right? And that's when I made the decision that these beats that he's created for this film will definitely be the soundtrack that will also help in also pushing the story, right?
Yeah.
Of I'm Still in Love with Kwaito, but also goes to show that Kwaito can still be done, as I said, in 2020, as he has proven, right? And then, like you were saying, copyright issues. I was tempted to use some music from the old guys, right? But then again, I thought these guys probably don't even own their own music. It's owned by some record companies that I won't mention, right? And in a space where you have to now clear publishing, music rights, and etc., you're gonna find yourself that instead of empowering a guy, I don't want to mention names still, you're gonna end up empowering a record company, which to them was just a transaction because Kwaito was huge at a certain time. They bought the masters and they owned the masters. And I was like, you know what, Enzo, it's okay. You can still get your point across using visuals. As long as it's a Kwaito documentary. Okay. And also, I was, like I said, I've never done anything like this. So I was also, you know, trying out a different way of telling a Kwaito story without having to play a Mdu song or a TKZ song.
Listen to me, brother. So after watching the documentary, I went and I listened to my playlist and my mix of Kwaito because I wanted to remind and live that Kwaito experience. So that's what I'm saying, that it plays out. But you touched on very important issues around how are we going to tell our culture when we don't own rights to that particular culture. But I want to say that at a certain level, I want to throw a question back to you to say, everybody makes content for a particular audience, right? So whether you're making it for a broadcaster or you're making it for a young audience or you're making it for hip hop heads, it has to be very specific or niched, or you are intentionally making it broad. In your space, where you're making this for a particular broadcaster or a particular audience, and what would you want me as a person that is Kwaito to take out of the documentary?
All right. I think I was not making it for a specific audience.
Yes,
you know,
sir?
I would say it was for a broader audience in a space that Kwaito is a South African genre. And, you know, like Zwei said on the film, it's in our DNA. So if you are South African and you watch the documentary, you can definitely relate, right?
Yes.
Yes. So I was doing it generally for South Africans, but also for content lovers across the globe as well. Because, you know, when you watch the film, I think you can relate to it from whichever corner of the globe you are at, right?
Yes. I think
Yeah.
there's a request to take some questions from Facebook and from the people that are viewing live. But before we go to that, Enzo, I'd like to drive you to answer this last question in this way, maybe, right?
Yeah.
The main question that I think I'm trying to build around audiences is that, do you think that for somebody that is sitting in the US, right? Let's talk about Netflix versus SABC as an example, versus even Channel O as the main platforms that would maybe distribute this. What do you think would differentiate your documentary from being a SABC one to being a Netflix documentary? What would you want to highlight? Where would you add? What would you improve? Because I think that's, you know, as you grow as a filmmaker, this issue of music and rights usage, it speaks also to access to archives, is something that is very important and that will add significant value to the talent of storytelling that is available.
All right. I think as far as distribution-wise, I would definitely say SABC is more suitable to broadcast such a product, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to a Netflix, right?
Yes. Yes.
And Netflix for me is more, you know, exclusive, right? Whereas SABC is more inclusive, right?
Yeah.
So on SABC, if I'm still in love with Kwaito Plays, chances are 1 million people are going to watch it and be inspired, right? Whereas on Netflix, you might get 5,000 views, right? And to people that might not necessarily even relate to the subject matter, right?
Yes.
I mean, I remember I did a film in 2017 and I had submitted it to Netflix, and Netflix got back to me and they said, unfortunately, at this point, we are not taking on South African content because South African content on a global scale doesn't have market share, right? They would rather take Nigerian movies or Brazilian movies. This is outside of the US, right? They would rather take Nigerian, they would rather take Brazil, they would rather take that because on a global scale, there is a demand for such content, right? And this was before Netflix started doing the South African thing now, right?
Yes, but the market has changed. I think that's what I'm driving to say. The market has changed, and the market dynamics require that perhaps even in showing the respect to the stories that we tell,
yes,
the time that we take to clear the music rights. You know, when you watch stories of Quincy Jones, we were all dreaming in the space that you are in to go and tell the stories of multiple legends in the Kwaito space, right? To go and tell just the story of TKZ itself, and you know the way that the story of hip hop bands in the US are told, where you end up with feature films about NWA. So I'm really congratulating you around the thematic of your documentaries, playing in this culture of the streets and continuing to tell that narrative and saying that it is something that I believe there is a global audience for, and that we should up our game to be able to deliver to that global audience.
No, definitely. I agree with you. South Africa has definitely got so much potential. And I think we just need to believe in ourselves, and we need to tell our stories in an authentic way. You know what I mean? In a nice, authentic way. And for me, I feel like we don't need really to, you know, there's that term, you know, the production value has to be of a certain standard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But sometimes we focus on the cameras and making sure that, you know, the quality is so good, but forget the story.
Yeah, right? No, I think, you know, filmmaking is really about getting all of those dots to join, but the spine is definitely the story, my brother. But definitely. I think you've really hit the note in terms of that story. And I think that is what the audience is echoing. There's it's a question and a comment from Barrett Williams on Facebook, and it goes something to the tune of, "Thank you so much for this documentary. It really took me back to my childhood. I'm still in love with Kwaito," and then it has those lots of hands that go big up like that. Yeah. And then it says, it was mentioned that American accent is very prominent within the South African hip hop scene. What are your personal thoughts about it, given the success that certain artists have experienced using the accent? Wowza. That's straight to you, Enzo.
Well, for me, I don't think there has been a South African hip hop artist who's been successful using an American accent.
Yeah.
Right? Just because somebody is on an American music show and is being featured by an American artist, to me, that does not equate success, because I know the music game and I know how it works. That's all PR. It's paid for collaborations. It's paid for flights. It's paid for PR. So for me, that doesn't reflect success. For me, what reflects success is what Master KG is doing with Jerusalem, right? That is success, where there's not even one English word, not even one American accent. It's pure South African music, and the world has embraced it. That is success. So as far as American accents go and these hip hop artists, no hip hop artist in South Africa has made a successful career abroad. Don't be fooled by the Instagram posts and the Def Jam signings and the features with the TIs. That is not success. Success is what Master KG is going through right now, and the whole world is dancing to him without even a single word in English. Which goes back to our even previous discussion about, you know, storytelling and the story being the spine. I wanted to add that one of my favorite movies of all time is Apocalypto by Mel Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
Not even one English word in that movie. And I've watched it over 50 times. So this notion of South Africans thinking, hey, you, hey, in order for us to be accepted, in order for us to make it overseas, has to come to an end.
The certain authenticity in speaking your mother tongue that you will never be able to translate otherwise if you are using another language.
Yes. Right? And if you're a hip hop artist and you just watch the documentary, I would say remain authentic. And the problem is not English. Don't get me wrong. There are hip hop artists who use English and sound South African because there is South African English because it's one of the official languages in South Africa, right? But there's obviously others who, the accents
who choose to emulate. The problem is when you emulate something that is not yours without innovating, without, like when you basically regurgitate something else that is not yours. Is that what the issue is around the accent?
That's the issue around the accent. And I mean, they will tell you, even when these artists get to America with those accents, Americans get shocked. Like, how? You say you're from South Africa, but why are you trying to sound like us? No, you are so fake. You know what I mean?
I think that we've dealt with that question because now we're going to start dealing with names. So let's maybe move to what. There's another question there, Enzo, that says there's so many players in the Kwaito scene. You could have interviewed, but you ended up with the characters that you featured. Have you got any story to tell around why those particular ones that you ended up interviewing and why not the others that you chose to exclude? I think that's what the question is asking.
Truth be told, I reached out to a lot of Kwaito legends, and what I've noticed with our Kwaito legends is, you know, the industry has basically, you know, thrown them to the side, right? And they are in a space where they are very bitter. They feel like they are not appreciated, right? And then when a young person like Enzo comes up and says to them, hey, I'm doing this documentary, I would like to interview you, they just automatically have this sense of, who are you? Are you trying to make money off us? What do you know about Kwaito? You know, and I won't mention any names, but there's various Kwaito legends that I went to, and I'll just say that the response I got from them wasn't very kind, you know? And just to answer the question, I would have loved to include a couple of more Kwaito legends, but you know, the response was not very kind.
I think I'll add to your answer by saying, hey man, you started, right? You had a great start. You had access to who you had. Yes. And for me, as a template for the future, there are so many other stories to tell around Kwaito. You started dealing with issues around Kwaito and politics. You started dealing with issues around Kwaito and fashion. We just spoke about Kwaito and language. There's Kwaito and you know, gender issues to discuss. So Kwaito is beyond just music. Kwaito was for people like us that lived through it. You know, it is what gave us the energy when you got to, for example, university in 1994. Bob Mabena would play, and he would play a couple of boom shaka, he would play a track or two there. Mawilis, and then all of a sudden, we would go out of the music venue, and then some white DJ with long hair would come in and play rock and roll, and the white students would come in and dance, and then, you know, we would swap DJs like that. So at a cultural level, my brother, Kwaito was, you know, very definitive in what it represented to my generation. And I think for you to try and be the vessel, the baton, or trying to hand over the baton about the story of Kwaito is very ingenious. And I encourage you to continue telling that story. Just to go to another question. There's a question here that says that what is the future of Kwaito? Do you think that there's a opportunity for the resurgence of Kwaito? I think that's a difficult question because I really believe Kwaito never died. Like Kwaito's
Yeah,
still here. Kwaito's not going
same
anywhere.
here.
I'm
Same
not
here.
Kwaito, you know, get house.
Like, and you are absolutely right. It's a very difficult question to answer because Kwaito never went anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, it's just that you know, some things get lost in translation. You get what I mean? I mean, Kwaito has evolved so many times, and it's just like, you know, I'll make an example with what's happening in the US, right? The biggest sound in the US right now, it's called trap, right? But trap still falls under the hip hop umbrella. So when you get nominated at the Grammy Awards as a trap artist, they won't give you a separate category and say the best trap artist for this year is no. They'll put you under that umbrella, the best hip hop artist. So what we have done with Kwaito is we have failed to put all these subgenres Kwaito under the Kwaito umbrella, right? Because when you look at Gong,
yeah.
when you look at Gong,
talk about hip hop and Zula and what he did, and
you know, that's Kwaito. You look at what we created with Kasi Rap in Soweto, that falls under Kwaito. You look at what Kabza the Small and DJ Maporisa are doing with Amapiano, that falls under Kwaito. So there's no resurgence. It never went anywhere. It's still there. You just maybe might know it by a different name.
No, I think we're on the same page about that one. More specific question here for you, Enzo, says, could you be more specific about your definition of success? It says, because Nasty C has achieved the platform that we see as success. If emulating gets you there, is it not success, irrespective?
No, and that's the thing. Like we have now started measuring success and cultural relevance according to capitalistic ways, right? If somebody, and this is across all fields of, you know, creatively, you know, be it presenting, be it presenting, be it whatever, we now judging people according to numbers. Like if Enzo has got 1 million followers and Do has got only 10,000 followers, then Enzo is the successful one. No. People are judging success according to Twitter numbers and Facebook numbers, and they're thinking that is success. No, my guy.
But it's about the cash, man. And you know, heads have got to live, right? They need to pay the bills.
Yeah, I've got no qualms.
The grills, you know, all of those things.
I've got. Trust me.
Have the accent to be able to get the access. Why are you not going to fake it? And
I've got no qualms with people making cash. I just defined what my version of what success is, right?
Yes.
My version of success is what TKZ are doing, or what they did with Halloween. An album that was released in 1998. Till this day, you can book them and it still sounds as fresh as yesterday. That is success. That is success. So if I can't measure success on something that is just trending, that is happening now, you are all over newspapers, you are traveling overseas and taking photos with famous people, and I say that's success? No.
No, man, I really wish you all of your success in building, you know, What's Beef, in building the Slaghuis brand. Because what you're saying is that there are lots of other streets, you know. Slaghuis was just one street, Kokasiaka, so it took DK, but on other streets as well, you know, there were Monday Blues, Koyoville. There was, you know, Skim GP. There's lots of cultures that are very recent, you know, movements, tribes, so to speak, as my big brother, or the one and only one, we would say. You know, we live in tribes and we create cultural tribes across the spectrum in different generations. You've tried to link your generation to a previous generation and say, yeah, there's no separation. You are continuing on that baton.
Basically.
Yeah. No. There's an opportunity for you, my brother, I think, to speak to people that are trying to do the same thing that you're doing. So I'm going to ask you going towards wrapping up, a very specific question about process, right? So just take us through the process that you go through when you create your documentaries. Are you working with a team? And more importantly, what did you and your team learn from this experience that you're definitely doing better as a team on your next documentary?
All right. I am definitely working with a team. I'm
Yeah.
working with... Yeah, man, I'm working with a group of very talented individuals. Our production manager goes by the name of Zuzegile Nzonge. You know, she came through with making sure that we are on time for interviews. People are called. You know, I'm working with another talented individual by the name of Neo Khailai, who's responsible for all the graphic stuff that you see. The camera operators were Tulane and Babalo, very talented young people. Our audio guy was Tapelo Mudiela, you know, who made sure that, you know, everything you hear there sounds crisp and clear, you know. And yeah, man, you know, the learning curve for us with this documentary, I think more than anything, especially for my team, since they are so young as well, was also realizing for them that, you know what, having to go back. I mean, I remember when, after we did an interview with one of the guys on the documentary, DJ Okapi, white guy, he's a white guy, you know, and they were actually so ashamed after the interview that this guy knows more about Black culture than them.
And that boy started putting up mixes when Napster was the it. So Okapi's done his thing, man. I think big up on, you know, like that's why I even speak about issues of race across the board, right? So Kwaito, Okapi was like, he's the coolest white boy that plays Kwaito, and then lots of them, right? You even
definitely
Kwaito artists at some point trying to even rap in Afrikaans, right? Or do Kwaito in Afrikaans. So yeah, sorry, I just disturbed you about what your learning curves are. Continue, sir.
Yeah, so for us, it was taking in all this information and learning on our journey of interviewing these guys. And then I think moving forth, like you had put it, what we can take from this experience is, number one, I think timing is also key, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, timing.
Bit of detail, what do you mean timing?
Timing, I think we would have possibly gotten other Kwaito legends had we had given it enough time, but also COVID happened, a lot of things happened, and we had to wrap up the project, and I'm happy with what came out. You know what I mean?
And the budget.
Yeah, hey, lead the budget. Hey, funding, man.
Yeah, talk about that a bit. Talk about that. How did you make money for this film? How did you get the money, and are you hoping to make money from the film?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely hoping to make money from the film. You know, the film was made possible through, you know, the contribution of the National Film and Video Foundation, you know, in collaboration with my company, Where's the Beef Media. So a very big shout out and a thank you to, you know, NFVF for believing in the vision, you know what I mean? And I'm definitely hoping to make money. The film will be aired on SABC1 in the next coming weeks. So we are going to license it to SABC1. That's another way of making money from, you know, the film. So yeah, we're definitely going to be making money from the film.
And go Facebook. They want to know, as you say that you are going to make money from the film. Before I even go to Facebook, I'll say distribution is always very important in, you know, the process of creating this kind of content. It actually makes or breaks whether you're going to be able to make your next one or not. If you're not making money from your current one, right, then you're going into loss. So are you, how are your projections of profit on this? Are you like, hey, or are you saying this is one of those that you are making for?
I'm not no, it's basically the amount of money that we invested into the film. It's definitely coming back,
Okay,
You
that's
know?
good. That's good. That's
Yeah.
what business. You're
It's
breaking even
definitely,
on what you're invested in the product, yeah?
yeah. So what we invested in the product, we're definitely getting the return on investments, right?
All right.
And the nice thing about our approach is we are licensing it. So that means this batch of money that's coming in now covers the investment. And then the
Yes.
next run, which is going to happen either on the same channel or on a Netflix, then that we might consider to be profit.
So you own the documentary, so that's
Yes.
why you are able to sell it. It was
Yes.
not commissioned by any broadcaster or
No.
any other funder. The intellectual property belongs to Enzo and what's the beef media?
Where's the beef? Yes, definitely.
Where's the beef? Where's the beef? Yeah.
Yes, and I think that is some advice that I would give to young up and coming filmmakers as well is fight for ownership. You know what I mean? Fight for ownership. It's sometimes you have to compromise, but go out there and fight for ownership, because ultimately, if you do it right and you own the content, you could basically live off your content for life.
For what? 100%.
Yes. So fight for ownership.
Yes. No, I mean,
Yep.
there's various initiatives around changes on the national policy and legislation around copyright amendment. And yeah, as you continue creating this content, I think it's about getting, a fay with what are the legal processes that get you to end up owning your content and what you need to go through, especially for first-time filmmakers, because it gives you an opportunity to, as you say, make money, for the generations, if you structure your ownership properly from the beginning.
Definitely.
Yeah. They want to know on Facebook, and that's the last question I'll take, and then I'll ask another last question from my side here. On Facebook, they want to know, do you think that the likes of Mzambia Msawawa deserve lifetime achievements award for their role in Kwaito? I think that's yeah.
Definitely, man. Definitely. They deserve it. They deserve it. I mean, think about it. Mzambia is probably the first child star that South Africa had under the new government.
Yeah.
I remember when I was young, and funny thing, we were talking about it the other day in the office, that in 1994, I saw Chris Cross doing jump, and they were kids.
Yes,
I related to that. And then fast forward to 3 years later, I then see Zambia on TV with and I was like, I could relate to that. I was like, this is the music I want to play. You know what I mean? So definitely, Zambia deserves a Lifetime Achievement Award. He gave us so many classical albums as well. You know what I mean? And
big up to people like Osmek and people that are trying to build museums, people that are trying to create
we definitely need a Kwaito museum.
Kinds of heritage. Generations to come will remember this era of Kwaito in the same way that we hold dear the generations of the 50s, from Medoli Ratebe to Memeriam Makeba, to all of the bands that came.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead, sir.
If we were to build a Kwaito museum, which neighborhood in Soweto do we build it in?
I'm gonna get into so much trouble for saying this, right? Go A8.
Cinema.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, that's historic. Well, I mean,
hey, this is not about me. This is about you. Let's get on to the last question. The last question, Babata Otsibare, what in your opinion is the most important quality in a documentary film director? What makes a great documentary filmmaker? And what's next for Enzo?
Yeah, I think what makes a great documentary is what we discussed before: the spine, the story, right? And also, if you've got access to archive material, trust me, your documentary is just going to have something that is, an X factor to it, if you can get the right archive material, right? And then what makes a great documentary director, I guess, being a visionary, you know what I mean? And being able to think about it and starting it, because that's also important, starting the project and consistently sticking to the vision until eventually you see it through to completing it. Because I know a lot of people who've started shooting, but when it got to the hard part, which is editing, they gave up.
Yes, sir.
So there's a lot of guys who are sitting with footage as we speak. You know what I mean? So what I would say makes a good director is see the vision through, start it and finish it.
Yeah, no, I think the principle is that, like anything else, storytelling is a journey. I watched, TED Talks by some of the directors of Pixar, talking about some of the principles that they used to build their animation company. But at the core of it, it was their decision on what story is and what techniques of storytelling that they had learned over a period of time. They were going to stick by and say, this is how we choose to tell our story. And it defined, a whole generation of animated content that came out of the US in terms of the Pixar content versus what you got from Disney with villains. So the point that I'm trying to drive at is that you have begun a journey of telling stories of the streets, stories of South African culture in a particular way. Definitely. I would like to thank you and your team and to encourage you to continue telling these stories, and to specifically thank the programmers of Encounters, the buyers at SABC, for giving people like you the space to be able to show your content, because I think that there is a insatiable appetite out there for South African culture, not only locally, but internationally. And on that note, Enzo, I'm going to ask you to just close off and wrap up the discussion by answering just one particular question.
Yes.
What's next for you, my brother? You didn't answer that. Where are you taking your documentary film making next?
Before I answer that question, I also want to acknowledge the contribution by HD Television as well, in facilitating our conversation with the likes of broadcasters like the SABC. And then what's next in terms of my direction with documentary filmmaking is I would like to go to the rural areas, right? Because I was in Limpopo 2 weeks back, went back to the village, reconnected with, and it dawned on me as I was having discussions with my aunts, with my uncles, and us just sharing stories, and I was like, wow, here is my next documentary. I obviously don't want to give away much.
Yeah.
But I'm going back home.
I'll because I'm being pressured to wrap up, my brother, I'd like to wrap up by saying thank you very much to the Encounters Documentary Film Festival and Definitely. All of the associated sponsors of the festival. Thank you very much to you, Enzo. What you are saying as your closing point. One of my, most favorite African filmmakers used to say, go and tell the story of your grandmother and your grandfather. Once you've mastered telling the story of your grandmother and your grandfather, then you will know that you are fit to go and tell the story of the world. So go back, my brother, to the village, tell those stories, tell the stories of culture, of your own culture, the best way that you can. We will be able to build this network of storytellers and to showcase our work. So I congratulate you and I thank you for being part of Encounters 2020 and for your film, sir.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Definitely enjoyed the Q&A.
Thank you very much, sir. To the next film at the next edition of the festival. And to everyone that's been viewing, thank you very much for participating. We are going to hand over to the people behind the scenes now. Thank you very much for staying with us for the hour.
I'm still in love with Kwaito.
Thank you very much. And they must check it out on the Encounters Festival website, as well as on SABC One soon, right?
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. And we're out.